All right, let's talk about Turkish citizenship. Now, the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to picture a house with two totally different doors. One door, well, you're just born inside the house. The other door, you've got to knock and ask for the key. Let's start by walking through that first door.
But first, what even is citizenship? At its heart, it's just this legal bond between a person and a country. And it's very much a two-way street. You get certain rights, like being able to vote, but you also take on obligations, things like paying taxes, or, for men in Turkey, military service. The whole rulebook for this relationship in Turkey, it's all laid out in one place, Law number 5901.
And that law basically creates two completely different ways to become a citizen. The first path is by birth. It's an automatic right. You don't do anything. The second is something you apply for later in life, and that is a conditional process. So you're either born into it, or you have to earn your way in. So let's stick with that first door for a minute, the automatic right. Just think about it like this. You were born inside the house. That's it. You already belong. There's no application to fill out, no interview to pass, no long waiting period. You are, by law, a Turkish citizen from the very moment you're born. And the reason for that is because Turkish law is built on a really important principle called Jus Sanguinis. It's Latin for right of blood. And what that really means is that your citizenship comes from your parents, not from where you were born. So if even one of your parents is a Turkish citizen, then congratulations, so are you. It doesn't matter if you were born in Istanbul, Berlin, or Tokyo. Now, here's where it gets kind of interesting, because there's a specific nuance to how this bloodline thing works. If your mother is Turkish, citizenship is automatic for the child. It's immediate, no questions asked. But if it's only the father who is Turkish and he's not married to the foreign mother, it isn't automatic. He actually has to take a legal step first, like officially acknowledging the child or getting a court order, to establish that he is in fact the father. Only then does the child become a citizen. Okay, but what happens if a child is born in Turkey, but their foreign parents can't pass on their own citizenship for some reason? Well, to make sure no child ends up stateless, Turkish law has this safety net. It's called Jus Soli, or right of soil. In these very specific situations, a child born on Turkish soil who can't get citizenship from anyone else becomes a Turkish citizen by default. So, that brings us to the second door. This is for everyone who wasn't born with citizenship. This is you standing outside the house, politely asking for the key. You have to prove that you're worthy of being let in. And in the end, the decision of whether or not to give you that key rests entirely with the owner. And this quote, right from the law itself, is probably the single most important thing to understand about this second path. Meeting the conditions does not grant an absolute right to citizenship. Let that sink in. It means even if you check every single box, meet every single requirement, your application is perfect. The government still has the final say. It's their choice, not your automatic right. And this table does a great job of breaking down the three main ways you can apply for that key. You've got the general path, which requires you to live in the country for 5 straight years. The marriage path needs 3 years of a stable marriage to a Turkish citizen. But then look at the investment path. 0 residency required. None. And notice who has the final say. For the first 2, it's the Ministry of Interior. But for the investment route, that decision comes directly from the president. So what does that general path actually ask of you? Well, the bar is pretty high. We're talking 5 years of uninterrupted legal residency. You have to speak Turkish well enough. You've got to prove you can support yourself financially. You need to be in good health. And then you get to these 2 really crucial, and let's be honest, kind of subjective criteria. You have to be of good moral character, and most importantly, you cannot be seen as a threat to national security. Now, back to that investment path. What's the price of that shortcut? Well, this is the magic number. The most common way to do it is to buy at least $400,000 worth of real estate. And here's the catch. You have to promise not to sell it for at least 3 years. This route lets you bypass the language and residency stuff completely. So, you've decided to apply. What happens next? Let me tell you, it's not a simple paperwork drop-off. It's more like running an application gauntlet. Your file gets passed through a whole series of different government agencies, each one acting as its own filter. The whole process basically has 4 main gates you have to get through. First, they just check your documents to make sure everything's there. Then, gate 2, the police department does a really deep dive, a full background and security check. This is a huge filter. If you pass that, you move to gate 3, a face-to-face interview with a commission that's going to test your Turkish and see how well you've integrated. And only after you've passed through all of those gates does your file finally land on a desk at the Ministry of Interior for that ultimate yes or no. So you have to ask, why? Why is the system designed like this? Why is there one super easy automatic door and one really difficult conditional one? Well, it all goes back to the philosophy, the why, behind the law itself. See, the entire law is a massive balancing act. On one side, you have that bloodline principle, which is all about preserving a sense of national identity, something passed down through generations. But on the other side, the country has very real modern needs. It wants to attract foreign investment, bring in talent, and, follow international rules like preventing people from being stateless. Those two doors we talked about, they really just reflect these two competing goals. And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. This struggle isn't unique to Turkey, not at all. A lot of countries are wrestling with this. As our world gets more and more connected, how does any nation strike that balance between the identity of who it once was and the practical needs of who it has to become? It's one of the biggest questions of our time. Thanks for joining me.